Situational judgment is one of the easiest subtests on the UCAT if you know how to do it right. There are scenarios that come up again and again and again, so I'm here to lay it all out for you. I've been making loads of videos on the UCAT as well on my channel, so things like quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning, and I have free cheat sheets, so if those are videos you're interested in, make sure you check out the link below. I also make loads of videos on my channel about getting into dental school, as well as life as a dental student because I'm a 4th year now, and productivity tips. So if those are things that you're interested in, make sure you subscribe, and let's get into the video. So you have 26 minutes to answer 69 questions, and this is the least time pressured section of the UCAT. So this means you have around 22 scenarios and up to 6 questions each per scenario, which gives you around 23 seconds per question. And it's actually really good because each scenario encompasses multiple questions, so you actually have more than 23 seconds per question, and you only really need to read the scenario once or twice for loads of questions. But the thing is, you need to make sure that you really read it thoroughly, because there are certain words that could be very integral in the answer that you choose, and missing 1 or 2 of these would mean like you get that question wrong. So there are 2 different types of questions in the SJT. There are importance questions and appropriateness questions, and basically there are a list of 4 options, and it ranges from, for example, appropriate to inappropriate, and you basically get full marks if you pick the right choice. But if you are on the right spectrum, either the yes, this is a good thing, or no, this is a bad thing, then you get half marks. So the first thing that you should do whenever you come across a question is realizing, okay, this action, because each question is an action towards the scenario. So when you get the scenario, it's like something happened, for example, confidentiality was breached or something like that, and then the question will be like, okay, this is the action that you do. So whenever you see this kind of question, you think, okay, is this action going to be a good thing to do or a bad thing to do? And that will already give you a partial mark. So it actually isn't that hard, but there are things that they trick you up on. But what does appropriate but not ideal even mean? So very appropriate means that it deals with the situation directly and it deals with the key issue. Appropriate but not ideal means that it doesn't really directly deal with the key issue, but that it has minimal to no negative consequences. Inappropriate but not ideal means that it's not a good approach to do, but it doesn't have any negative or minimally negative consequences. And then a very inappropriate thing to do is something that does have negative consequences. For example, jeopardizes patient safety, and that is something that is very serious. It's kind of like very obvious which ones are very, very inappropriate. So yeah, you'll basically figure those out. And same with the importance questions. Very important means that it is a very important thing to consider and deals with the actual key issue. Important means that it is important, but it is not essential to consider, and it doesn't address the key issue. Of minor significance means that it's not really relevant, but it doesn't have any negative consequences, or at least has minimal negative consequences. And not important means that it's completely irrelevant and it doesn't address the key issue. I talk a little bit more about specific examples later on in this video, but basically what UCAT do is they compare your response to what a board of medical professionals would do and see what their average answer is, and then that would be the answer. But you don't need to worry, because there are scenarios that come up again and again and again, and they have the same answer. So if you learn these ethical principles as well as the common scenarios, I guarantee you a minimum of a band 2, if not band 1. So the exam is marked with bands, with band 1 being the best and 4 being the lowest. And I can't lie, if you get a band 4, universities will not be looking at you very favorably, because they don't want a student that is like not very ethical, not very moral. And so that's why it's really important to also focus on your SJT and your UCAT, because they're both so important to your application. A lot of people make the mistake of disregarding this because it's just ethics and choosing the best decision. How hard could that be? But there's a lot more to it. Obviously, once you revise and stuff like that, it is a very easy subtest, but you need to make sure that you know the foundations and the ethical principles and what they expect for you to answer. I think it would also be really useful for you to know the average UCAT scores over the last few years, and in 2020 it was 30%, which is actually the highest it's been in a long time. A lot of these scenarios are based on the ethical knowledge section of this video, which I'll get to in a second, but I think it's really, really important to know these scenarios inside out, so you know exactly how to respond to these scenarios when they come up. So with every scenario there is a key issue. For example, if the scenario was talking about a medical student making a mistake, then the key issue here would be patient safety, probably. But if the question is talking about how his co-workers are annoyed that he's making more mistakes, or that there is an extra workload or something like that, that is a very common one, then it wouldn't be the key issue and it would not be an important thing to consider. So these are the 17 common scenarios I think you should be aware of. The first one is misinformation, which is something that comes up all the time. It's really important that your patient knows all of the information, the risks and benefits, all of the treatment options and stuff like that, that they have informed consent and autonomy, which I will go through in a second. But it's really, really important, because a lot of the scenarios will be like, oh, like I don't want to tell this patient all of the information because they are less likely to take the treatment or something like that. And that is not a good way to go about it. The second scenario is when you jeopardize the public's opinion of the profession. So for example, rumors or something that always comes up, and basically in this scenario you should always be professional, you should never be irritable, you should always follow the rules and regulations, so nothing illegal, because that is also something that comes up. Another one that always comes up is how important is it that X illegal act was carried out that nobody knew about. Now the key issue here is that the illegal act had been carried out, not that nobody had figured out that it had happened. So it would be a not important at all, because it's not something that you're considering. It's not addressing the direct key issue, and the key issue is that X illegal act had been occurred, and so addressing that key issue is an appropriate thing to do, and how important it is that nobody knew about it is not important at all. Another scenario is anything involving patient safety is automatically going to be important. It is the first thing that people think about, and the first thing about ethics that you should know. If in a scenario it's talking about seeking advice, that is almost always going to be an appropriate thing to do, apart from when it's really petty matters, or if it's with co-workers at a local level. So with co-workers, you are expected to deal with that, like first go locally and do your communication with them and see if you can confront them or address the issue, and then obviously if that's not working, then you would go to a higher power. But you wouldn't escalate it straight away to like the GMC or something like that. You'd first go to your superior and then your consultant or whoever it is above you. And another thing that comes up all the time is acknowledging your mistakes. Now this one is very common, but it sounds dumb as well, but your patient should always know the truth, regardless of whatever. They should know what happens in full and the mistakes you made, and obviously you do it in a professional way as well, so not being rude. The patient basically has the right to know the full truth. And the next scenario is documentation. So make sure that all documents are obviously legal, like it's all done well, and no like doctoring of notes and stuff like that, because that is a scenario that has come up a lot of times. And the next one is clinical response. So make sure that mistakes or rumors or anything like that is not affecting your treatment or your diagnosis. Another one that is so common is your scope of practice. Some of these scenarios will have you be a medical student, some of them will have you be a doctor, and it's really important to know the roles that you have, because as a medical student you can't do a lot of things, like for example prescribing a drug or something like that, especially without a senior being there. And so this is something that comes up all the time, and it's really important that you know how to deal with this. There is also some really good resources that I'll have in the resource section of this video that talks specifically about being a medical student and your scope of practice and your limitations, what you can and can't do. Another one that comes up quite often is rumors. So when there is a rumor, you have to make sure that you have all the facts before you make a decision, and it has to be clear evidence. Rumors is not enough to change your opinion of someone or even to treat them differently, because you should never be treating someone differently based on like a rumor, for example their treatment or your clinical diagnosis of them. So that is something really important. Rumors are a very tricky one, but there is a way to work around it. As long as there's no clear evidence of it, there is no need for you to change anything or to let the rumor spread as well. So another scenario is letting a rumor spread. It's very important that you don't let any rumors go wild, and that you don't exacerbate it, because it will ruin the public's opinion of the profession, and that is something very important to keep pristine, because it essentially undermines the profession. The next scenario is accepting a gift. You should never accept a gift, full stop. The next scenario is keeping personal and professional boundaries. So obviously you should never have a romantic relationship, but also your relationship with a co-worker should never influence the decisions that you have to make. For example, because you like this co-worker, you're not going to tell on them when they do something illegal or something like that. Obviously it sounds really obvious, but these are scenarios that just come up again and again. Substance misuse is also another one that they love to put in there. This is obviously an illegal act, and you should first of all confront the co-worker, see what's going on, but if it involves patient safety, it should be escalated. It's a very serious and serious situation. And in the same vein, anything lying or illegal is completely inappropriate. And in those veins, witnessing a colleague do an inappropriate or illegal action is something that always comes up and is a scenario that's always there. And then finally, one of probably the most common scenario is making sure that your doctor-patient relationship is strictly confidential. It's something that you should never assume that they've given permission for example, a family member. You should always get direct permission from the patient to share their information if they feel comfortable. Even if it's a consultant, even if it's anyone else, medical student, whatever, without their permission, you have no right to be spreading this information. And it's very important to maintain this privacy. And so those were all of the scenarios, but some tips I can give you is, one, always directly address the key issue and do it immediately. The second tip is making sure that you always have enough information before you react to a situation. You don't want to be doing it prematurely, or like I said before, on rumors. It's really important that you have hard facts before you make a decision or make a further step. And it's always really good to remember that patient safety is the first thing to do when in doubt, and also seeking advice is always like a okay thing to do, unless, like I said, it's petty matters or local issues that you can solve. So doing nothing is always going to be an inappropriate thing to do, as well as ignoring the problem or hoping that somebody else will solve it. And in that same vein, you should never wait to see that person do it again. For example, with like substance abuse or anything that you think that a person did wrong, you should always confront them, and you should never wait for them to do it again or something like that. There is always like a statement that always comes up that's like, oh, should you like just, you're not sure that it happened, so you just leave it and see next time if it happens again. But that's not what you should do. You should confront them, be like, oh, like I'm not sure if this happened, all of that stuff. So for ethical knowledge, there are some key principles I think all link together really nicely. And I know that a lot of people talk about the 4 ethical pillars, but I think there are other things as well as that are more relevant to the SJT. So here are 10 areas that I think you should understand and know inside out to be able to answer these SJT questions. So capacity is one of the main key concepts in medicine. It is really important to know that your patient has the ability to make an informed decision as well as autonomy over the decision. Basically what capacity means is that they have the ability to weigh up the pros and cons of a decision and come to a conclusion. For example, a patient with late stage Alzheimer's is very unlikely to be able to have the capacity to make an informed decision. And informed consent is really important because this goes along with one of the scenarios, misinformation. You have to make sure that the patient has all of the information that they need to make a decision, the risks, the benefits, the pros and cons, all the other treatment options, as well as they should be able to understand this stuff. So it's all well and saying that you can list out all of the medical textbook things, but if they don't understand it, they aren't able to make an informed decision. Autonomy is the next key concept, and that is where the patient has the right to refuse or to go ahead with a treatment, and we have to respect that decision as long as they have the capacity to do it. Confidentiality is also another key concept, and that is where you have to respect the patient's privacy, and you should never share that patient information with anyone else, even if you think that they would want to share it with their family member or with another colleague or consultant or something like that. They need to have the direct permission first, and then you can go ahead with whatever you are going to share. But it's very, very important that you don't disclose this to anyone else, and there are only very, very, very few cases where you would need to disclose the information without the patient knowing or consenting. Abiding by the rules and regulations is something that always comes up, and I think it's very important that you just drill this into your mind. As well as maintaining trust in the profession and the doctor-patient relationship is very, very important. You need to make sure that you're never ever jeopardizing or undermining the profession, and this is something that the GDC love to see and love to put into scenarios. Equality is something that is also really, really important, and that is where you are treating everybody fairly regardless of skin color or race or religion or medical conditions and stuff like that, because that is something that could come up as well. And I've already touched on this before, but patient safety is the most important thing and is the #1 priority at all times. And finally, the last one is knowing scope of practice. Like I said before, you have different scenarios where sometimes you're a medical student, sometimes you're a doctor, and it's really, really important that you know what your limitations are, because you are not able to do a lot of the things, and it is very important that you know that and what you can and can't do. So obviously if you're in a time crunch, you're not going to be able to do things like read tomorrow's doctor, which everybody tells you to do. It's not an efficient use of your time. But if you are going to do some reading and you have some time, I think you should start with the Kaplan book. That is so good. The theory in there is invaluable, and I can't lie, I did the Kaplan course, and so I learned a lot of the things, and I don't actually recommend doing the course. I think everything is in the book mostly, but literally I got a band 1 effortlessly, and I really didn't even spend that much time practicing. I spent my time practicing on the other sections, which I found really hard. And so obviously pretty much everyone has talked about things like the GMC guidelines as well as tomorrow's doctors and ethical principles and stuff like that. So you already know this, but let me give you some resources that you probably don't know about. So there were another set of guidelines published by the GMC, but this time specifically to medical students. Now it's so useful because I've talked about so many times before that you need to know scope of practice and stuff like that, but they also go through ethics, and I think this is a really good read if you have the time. But I also, like, brutally honest, I don't think that you need to read all of these things, and I don't think that you need to read these to get a band 1 at SJT. I think that if you know about the principles I talked about in this video, as well as doing scenario practice, like loads and loads of practice, timed practice, as well as I will create a free cheat sheet that you can download in the link below, which I think will be so useful because you just need to ingrain these scenarios into your head, and then after you've done some practice, I think you will be really good and on your way to get a band 1. And so remember, obviously, that theory is only the first part of your exam prep. You need to spend the bulk of your time doing practice questions and doing them timed, and I think Medify is unbeatable for that because they have such a good online bank, and it's online, which is the best part, and it's timed, they have explanations. It's just really good overall, I think. And it's really good doing practice and doing more questions, because the more scenarios that you see, the more exposed you are to them, the more that they are subconsciously being ingrained into your head, and the more prepared you will be for the exam, because you will have seen these questions before. Well, that's all from me. I hope that was really helpful. On my channel, I also have other videos on the UCAT talking about quantitative reasoning and abstract reasoning and stuff like that, as well as free cheat sheets. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you go to the links down below and check out those videos. Otherwise, on my channel, I make loads of other videos on application process and getting into dental school, as well as life as a dental student, because I am a 4th year, and productivity tips. So if those are things that you're interested in, check them out, check out my channel, subscribe, and yeah, I will see you later. Bye!